truth is what
We have a great speaker here tonight who's going to be running for the governor's position. We all know we need somebody with some common sense in there. And the other thing that's special about tonight is that Tom Pollitt has put a great effort together with the committee to begin the Unite Orange County mission. It is to bring all conservative groups together to promote constitutional conservative values and elect candidates who support those values. UniteOC was formed to bring conservative groups together to form a more powerful voice in Orange County. By having 100 groups with 100 members, we now have a voice of 10,000. Orange County would be the 21st largest state based on population if we were a state. We need to be responsive to the people of Orange County by representing their needs. Working together, we can provide more resources for specific projects and not reinvent the wheel all the time if we were to do it individually and by ourselves. We are doing this by providing a master calendar of events and networking on a monthly basis. Unite Orange County values are limited government, constitutional values, free enterprise system, and personal responsibility. One of our first projects is the Conservative Candidate Boot Camp. The boot camp is a 3-part program training local and state candidates. The first part is an 11-week Constitution class so that the candidate would understand the history and basis of our Constitution and be able to defend it. The second part is a Toastmasters club for political topics. We formed our own club with more than 25 members who want to be able to articulate conservative thought. The third part of the actual boot camp is a 6-class program on how to run a campaign and win. We've formed a political action committee which will be available for those candidates who demonstrate conservative values. Our first event is tonight, a chance to introduce everyone in Orange County to a candidate who wishes to run for governor. Now, I looked into Tim Donnelly by going on the web, and I picked up a few pieces of information, but he really doesn't like long introductions. In other words, he's going to come and tell you what his heart and soul is about and how he thinks he can improve this state. I did find, though, by looking into his history, that he's very concerned about driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, putting employers at risk of violating federal law. He's very concerned about resident aliens at the polling booth. Can you imagine? These people might not be speaking English and they might not be citizens of our state or our country. The guy who's in the big house right now thinks that's okay. Tim's also very concerned about pension reform, and I'd be very interested in his thoughts about minimum wage, having been in small business most of my life. With that, I would like to introduce to you somebody who's running for governor. Listen carefully and be prepared to ask some questions if you have any. He will answer your questions at the close of his remarks. Please welcome Tim Donnelly.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, John. What a delight it is to be here. You know, I went to school not far from here, and it was so many years ago, I do not recall. But I know I had a lot more hair and a lot less of this. But you know, I came to California when I was 19 years old, and it was funny. I was leaving my home in Michigan, and as I was, about half my family, I'm the third oldest of 14, were helping me push start my VW Bug. And I turned around to see if maybe they were going to be there to wave goodbye, and instead they were inside fighting over my room. But my dad came out, chased me halfway down the street, and brought me $2 in quarters, wrapped in aluminum foil. They said, "Son, whatever you do, don't call home." And then he said, "You know, get yourself a Coke somewhere between here and California." And as I drove across this great country, I went through state after state after state, and yes, I did go through Texas, and no, I didn't feel like stopping. Something changed when I crossed the border into California. There's something special about our state. When I got down to the beach, the only place I could afford to stay was Costa Mesa, but I drove to the beach and I saw my first California sunset. And that's when I fell in love. I knew I was home. I knew I was in a place where the sky was the limit. We were the land of opportunity. You're only limited by what you could dream. And you know, within a decade, I had completed my education, and I want to thank all of you because you made an investment in me as an out-of-state student, because the next year I became an in-state student and my tuition dropped by 2/3. But it was half what I was paying in-state in Michigan. And I don't know if you've ever been to Michigan, but what changed my mind about that state is when I was on a bus on my way to a final exam, and we were about to slide into a Pinto. And I said to God, I said, you know, if this Pinto doesn't blow up and I don't die, I'm moving to California. I don't know why I thought God would care, but you know what? The rest is history. I applied to school out here. And it was really nice to come to California and actually have football teams that win, because Michigan kept coming to the Rose Bowl and losing, even though I'm a diehard Wolverines fan. But I met the most beautiful woman in California. No offense to any of y'all here. Married her, and we now have 5 sons and a grandson. And I started a business in manufacturing. I used to go to school at UCI, and then I would go over to Costa Mesa and I would call on factory after factory after factory after factory. One day, one of my best customers called me up and said, you know, we want you to sell off some equipment. And I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, I usually call on you and I sell you stuff. And they said, no, we've closed the factory. So the week before, there were 400 people working there. They had hundreds of injection molding machines. This is right over off Briggs Street. And when I walked through there on this day, it was an echo chamber. It was empty. It was like a tomb. And I remember writing an entry in my diary, in my journal, about how I felt about that. But I never understood what caused it until I went to Sacramento. I mean, I had heard about it. We all talk about it. I mean, I can tell you all day long about overregulation, and all of you will nod your heads and smile and eat another piece of shrimp. You know, we have a governor right now who did an interview in the newspaper, and he said, I really, really, really wanted to say no. And then he signed 800 bills. He signed 800 new laws and regulations. And by the way, a law can birth dozens of regulations, because the regulations are handed down by these unelected boards and commissions that many of you are familiar with, like the Coastal Commission, the California Air Resources Board, the State Water Resources Control Board. All these different unelected boards and commissions that control our lives and control the business climate in this state. And by the way, the governor appoints an awful lot of people to those 571 boards and commissions. So my plan is real simple. I intend to take people from the industries that are regulated so that we have regulation with representation. And after we have repealed a number of the unconstitutional and just plain stupid regulations that the CARB board has done, I intend to shut them down. You know, California is the greatest state in this union, even now. I was in Riverside County earlier today and listened to the sheriff talk, and he said that Riverside County is larger than New Jersey. And Orange County is larger than many states. My district is 18,260 square miles. We are basically a small country. And what we do determines the future of this country. And you know, every single time you turn around in the state of California, we're doing the wrong thing. The pastor who talked about that bill, that is a bridge too far. You know, when that bill got passed, AB 1266, and let's be clear what it is. It has nothing to do with transgender or homosexuality at all. That bill is a one-page bill. If it had anything to do with the other things that I referred to, they would have required some sort of note from a doctor or evidence that you're in counseling or taking hormone therapy. But instead, it is a license for the boys to ogle the girls in the locker room while they're naked taking a shower. And I see some of you, oh, I see a couple of you guys going, yeah, I would have done that. Admit it. But that's the reality. That's in human nature. And so, geez, if this is such a good idea, you'd think they'd start it in the Capitol, right? How many of you have been to the state Capitol? How many of you have tried to get into the women's bathroom? Well, you can't, because it has a lock on it. You need a 3-digit code, and the only person who gets it is a female who asks another female, because males have gone in after females and assaulted them right there in the Capitol building. But what's good enough for our government is not good enough for our kids. That really ought to be all we say about it. This idea that they will encroach on the local control and the wise decision making that was made on the local level to provide private accommodations. That respected the 1% that identify themselves as transgender without turning them into targets like this bill will. But it also respected the privacy of the 99% who aren't. Sounds like a win-win to me. But Sacramento decided they needed to overrule it because they've run amok. We are not ruled by a supermajority of Democrats. We are ruled by a supermajority of Marxist progressives who have a clear agenda to force socialism on California. So let me tell you why I love the theme of tonight. It's about unity. And you know, California is often described as a blue state or a liberal state. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are a conservative state, at least on fiscal issues. But we are a divided majority. And I intend to unite that majority with my campaign. I intend to unite the Tea Party with the Republican Party, the Libertarians with the disaffected Democrats, and I intend to win the majority of the vote of the fastest growing party in the state of California called Neither. You know, we laugh, but there's a reason that they're leaving the parties, because the parties have left us. And that's sad. But it's true. When you stop standing for what you believe in, nobody wants to stand with you. But you know what's amazing? A lot of people say, well, how can a guy as conservative as you ever win a state like this? I don't know, but Rob Schneider thinks I can win. And he was a liberal Democrat up until he met me. And he's fully, completely, openly endorsed me. And if you haven't seen it, it's on our Facebook, it's on our website, and it's been spread all over Fox News and in the media. And it shocks a lot of people because we disagree on about 80% of the issues. And you know how you have lunch with somebody you disagree with? Well, when they're talking about their ideas you don't agree with, you eat. But you also don't point out what you don't agree on. You focus on the things you do. And you know, I have a simple plan. I'm for what works and I'm against what doesn't. I think we should frack our way to prosperity. Instead of putting offshore oil rigs out there that seem to set the eco-tyrant's hair on fire, I think we should slant drill. We can do that safely, we can protect the environment, and we could lower the cost of fuel in this state, especially if we built the 2 more refineries we need. We ought to make that easier, and we ought to unleash California's potential by getting the government out of the way. We need to liberate Californians from oppressive taxes and regulations. I would lower the income tax rate and use the bully pulpit to fight for that. And you know what? A lot of people say, well, you're going to have a supermajority against you. And I say, so? Really? Well, every one of those assemblymen and state senators wants to get bills passed and bills signed. And they would have to go through me. And I have no problem saying no to every single one of them. Can you imagine how much attention would be paid to their votes if they vote to overrule something that is bad for California? Now all of a sudden we could be picking them off onesies and twosies at a time instead of the reverse. You know, I think California is a great state. It's a state I love. Did I hear someone say, yeah? Come on, you guys got to wake up a little bit. Don't let that sound of progress. You know what that is? That's the sound of the high-speed rail. It's called Southwest Airlines. You can ride it for 49 bucks. You know, I think we ought to finish that project by slapping some bumper stickers on the Southwest airliners that just say high-speed rail, and then let's give the people their money back. But you know, you might wonder, how am I going to win over people for whom the Republican brand has become toxic, who don't understand and have never connected with the ideas of conservatism? Well, you know, the way you win elections is you got to touch people's hearts. And I'm going to ask you, how many of you here have heard about this story about the baby that was kidnapped from its mother by a government agency because she wanted a second medical opinion? That was Child Protective Services. It happened up in Sacramento County. The family were immigrants from Germany and Russia. And the mother went in because the 5-month-old baby had a temperature. And she knew he needed open heart surgery. He had had a heart murmur since birth. And something just didn't set right with her. She was not happy with the treatment that he was getting at the hospital. And she just decided that after the doctor said he didn't need the antibiotics the nurse gave him, and then the doctor said, oh, by the way, he needs open heart surgery right here, right now, tonight. She said, that's it. I'm out of here. Well, they brought in a government agent, a social worker, who told her, you're free to leave, but your baby isn't. Well, being a new American who actually believes in her rights, she grabbed her child and she left. She went to another hospital. They sent the cops. The police officer who came there said, there's no crime here. And the doctor said, she's on a path for a referral. He doesn't need surgery tonight. So the officer said, we don't need to be involved in this case, and he closed it. 24 hours later, CPS showed up with 5 police officers at their door. She asked them if they had a warrant. They said yes. She said, show it to me. They said, no, you have to open the door. She said, no, hold it up to the window. She called her husband. Her husband came home. They tackled him on the porch, took the keys out of his pocket, and broke into their home. But this woman did something amazing. She rolled a video camera. She had it set up on a tripod. You can watch the whole thing. I called and began making phone calls. I got my friend Rob Schneider to make phone calls. I began demanding answers. Where do you get the power? By what authority do you have to come to somebody's home without a warrant? Well, we've given them that authority in the name of protecting children. You know, the last thing the social worker said, the cop said to her, if you don't let go of the baby, we're going to arrest you for resisting. So she handed over her child. And as they're walking out the door, she asked the social worker, where are you taking him? And the social worker turned around and said, you don't get to know, because you're acting irrationally. And then they took the baby back to the exact same hospital she had lost confidence in. You know, something about that just irked me. And when I finally got on the phone with the top person and they told me, we don't answer to you, I thought, what do bureaucrats hate more than anything? They hate a paper trail. So I wrote a quick letter, I put it on my letterhead, and then my young staff had left for the evening, but I figured out how to screenshot it. It took me like 5 tries. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's to turn it into a picture so I could put it on Facebook. I went to dinner, and 2 hours later, one of my staffers texted me and said, there's 27,000 Russian immigrants who want you to run for president. And I had to break the news to him, I'm only running for governor. From that point, I began demanding an audit. I went on Fox News with Megyn Kelly, who was a grizzly mama bear on this. And she did a great interview and began to spread the message. And this agency began to feel the heat. And they gave the child back to the parents, trying to cover their tracks. But I wanted to investigate. I wanted to get to the bottom of this, because this is at the heart of what is wrong. This is a personal and intimate form of tyranny. So I enlisted the aid of a powerful Democrat and allowed him to take a lot of the credit. Sometimes if you just get out of the way and let others take the credit, it's amazing what can happen. And then something tragic happened. A couple days before the hearing to determine whether or not we would actually audit Child Protective Services in the state of California, a young boy was brutally murdered by his parents because Child Protective Services never even bothered to show up at the last report. They just carried him out in a body bag. He was killed by the people who were supposed to love him. And the government agency that had the power never even used it. So at my hearing, all of a sudden, instead of having 3 news crews, there were 25. We had people travel from all over the state of California. Many of them could barely afford the gas to get there. Most of them were not Republicans. A great majority are the working poor. Many of them were immigrants. They'd become targets because they won't speak out. But we have a government agency that kidnaps kids for cash because there's a federal program that gives them dollars. And they have a union called the SEIU, and they grow their mission every single year. This is why government is the fastest growing industry in the state of California. But something happened in this story. The hearing room was lined with cameras after we had held a rally outside. All the people from the rally came through to testify. I told the chairman, I said, I don't think there's that many people here, so you should probably let us go first. 100 witnesses later, he apologized on behalf of the state of California to the Nikolaev family. And then something beautiful happened. I heard liberal Democrats speaking out against government intrusion and said, we need to not only investigate this, but we need to make sure this never happens again. And so they have already signed up for the reforms I'm going to bring, but I don't trust the auditor to come up with all that. So I began holding hearings. There was a huge demand. I was in East Los Angeles in a room packed full, standing room only, with people who have never even met a Republican, let alone been one. They were all the demographics that we say we want to reach out to. people who are black and Hispanic and Asian, immigrants. And every single solitary one of them is supporting me for governor, all because I did the right thing. All because I came there and held a hearing and I listened to their painful stories. And I listened to them tell me our message. Many times in broken English. There was one lady who pulled the group together. She's an immigrant from, I believe, the Dominican Republic. And she talked about how her family was fleeing communism, fleeing a dictator and government control, only to come here and find this country isn't free. And that we are doing the exact same thing. When people begin to tell you your message in broken English with tears, that's how we win. That's how they have won year after year after year, by organizing people around issues that affect people's hearts. So we have to start talking about the confiscation of our freedom. And not only the confiscation of our freedom, but the confiscation of our earnings, in order to empower a government that wants to bereft us of control over our lives. You know, the non-stop assault on the Second Amendment, we shouldn't back down from that issue. That is a winning issue, because that issue is not about whether you like guns, it's about whether you love freedom. That is a constitutional civil right to not only defend your life, but to defend your freedom from tyranny. And you know, I consider it tyranny when someone like Jerry Brown wants to dump criminals onto our streets with this so-called realignment while taking away our right to defend ourselves. I think we ought to realign him. And you know, I've got an idea for Jerry Brown. I think he's needed in Texas. I think we should send him there on a one-way ticket with Southwest on the high-speed rail. What do you think? You know what? I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here tonight, for having an interest in defending our liberty. You know, this campaign in 2014 is not going to be about whether we're ruled by the right or left. It's not going to be about whether we elect a better-looking tyrant with a hotter wife. It's going to be about whether we stand up for right over wrong. Because I believe when the government wants to force socialism on you, whether it's your health care, whether it's your livelihood, it's wrong. And that's a moral issue. And you know, a lot of people say we shouldn't talk about the social issues. I think we should. We should talk about socialism when it comes to our health care. We should talk about social engineering when it comes to our kids in school. And that issue right there, the government just came to your school and threatened your child. What are you going to do about it? That is a great conversation that we can have with people. And by the way, if you have not signed that petition, we have them over here. And you can get some, and you need to get your friends and neighbors. You need to go to church, because the deadline is approaching. It's the end of this month. And we need to win that one. But that's a great way to get a whole lot more people to pay attention who weren't even political. We have a chance. We're living in historic times. California is going to be the battleground in 2014. You know, they may not see us coming, and that's just fine. I hope they keep saying in the papers, I have no chance. That's what they said about me the first time. You know what I did the night before the election? I was walking door to door right up until dark. I hit 60 doors. I went down one street and there was a man with his dog, and the dog was doing its business. And I got his vote. The man, not the dog. Come on. And then I won by 1 vote per precinct. One man, one voice, one vote can make a huge difference. And I believe we need to draw a line in the sand right here. We need to say we will not be driven off of our land. We will not be deprived of our private property rights. We will not be driven out of our homes and businesses in the state of California. We are going to stand and fight. And if you believe that California is worth fighting for, right now most politicians would very slickly reach into their pocket and pull out an envelope. But all I have is a 45 with hollow points. Oh. I need two things from you. I need your money and I need your contacts. And you know, when I say I need your money, I know that most of you can probably not give the maximum. There's very few people who can. I did not get elected by people who could make maximum donations. If you can, it's $27,200. Make sure you put a comma between the 7 and the 2. But you know what? I've had people give me $3 and quarters in an envelope. And to me, that represents somebody who really truly believes in this country enough to give what they can afford to give. So I'm going to ask each of you to prayerfully consider supporting this campaign, not only with your money, but by sharing me with your friends, by talking to your business associates, by talking to groups, by talking to people at your church, by sharing me on your Facebook page. If you didn't get a picture, believe me, I'll stick around as long as you'll Facebook it, because those are the ways that we're going to win. We are early in this campaign. I have been at this a year. I've been traveling this state. I have 350,000 miles on my car, and I'm trying to put 350,000 miles on Mark's. So this is a campaign that is in it to win it. And a lot of people will tell you that this is a fight we can't win. Well, you know, if we had believed that at the beginning of this country, we wouldn't be here. This is a fight that we must fight. And we must do it here in 2014. Because California cannot afford 4 more years of Jerry Brown. We need a brownout in California. So before I take your questions, I am simply going to ask you, if you're excited about what you heard tonight, if you are interested in getting involved, I want you to please stand to your feet, and the young people that are going through the crowd will make sure that you get an envelope so you can sign up and be involved in this campaign. Because this campaign is about liberty and about restoring California to greatness. Please stand to your feet if you're interested in being involved in getting more information.
Listening to Tim speak so strongly about the issues, I remember in my old college days of playing for John Wooden at UCLA basketball. He was teaching these concepts of commitment, reliability, responsibility, teamwork, sacrificing personal interests for the glory of all, and all these great principles. And so I started teaching those to all the little teams that I coached, and whether it was pro sport or even in amateur sports. And I remarked to this team and all the parents that you had to be at practice 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock, and if you weren't there, there'd be an issue with me. And so at practice finished one day, one of the little girls that was on my soccer team, she didn't show up for practice. She went to a pre-Halloween costume party and missed practice. And I didn't play her on Saturday. Her mother came up to me afterwards. She says, "John, how come my little girl didn't get to play?" I said, "I told you, we're trying to teach reliability, responsibility here, commitment. And you violated this rule, so your child didn't get to play. That's the repercussion of that." She said, "What are you, some kind of a zealot?" So with that, I went straight to Coach Wood and I said, "Hey, Coach, I was teaching those principles you were teaching me all about commitment, reliability, and so forth." And I said, "This woman called me a zealot." He had a big smile on his face. Then he held his hand up and he says, "John," he says, "where in the good book does it say that leadership is easy?" And so when I hear you speak passionately about this, I just think this is awesome. We need our freedom back. We need our taxes to be smaller. We need our expenditures on the government side to be smaller so that we can be free to do philanthropic things, to develop our businesses and create jobs. And by the way, as a afterthought of that story I just told you, there was a Hispanic mother and her daughter standing next to me as I was being torn apart by this woman and called a zealot. She came up to me the following week. She says, my little girl's been in soccer for 3 years now, John. She says, the conversation you had with that woman about commitment and the things you're trying to teach here and leadership, it's the best thing we learned in soccer in 3 years. By the way, it had nothing to do with soccer. It had to do with leadership. So let's open it up. If there's some questions, just raise your hand if you would, and I'll bring the microphone to you, and you can ask Tim your personal question towards him.
Hey, Tim, I'm curious what kind of effect you're having on the younger generation. Are you what's happening out there? Are they listening to you? Are you contacting them? Are you able to get a hold of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've got a pretty good turnout. I heard that a lot of the young...
20 college students are here to hear you, Tim, tonight.
Well, how many of you are anteaters? Woo-hoo. That's my alma mater. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming out, even those of you who don't go to UCI. But, you know, it's an interesting question because I went to Berkeley last week. I spoke to the poli-science class. It's 600 liberals and 3 conservatives huddled in the front row. They're some of my favorite people because they're behind enemy lines. But you know what was amazing? I told the story that I told you here tonight. And I talked about a couple other things. I talked about my experience on the border. I talked to them about human trafficking and exploitation and modern day slavery. And how I think that's evil and we ought to stamp it out here in this country. And we shouldn't tolerate that. You know what? I not only got applause, but I had people coming up to me afterwards. I had liberals writing me messages on Facebook, sharing their personal stories of how they connected. So I think we make a huge mistake when we assume just because somebody might have a D next to their name that we have nothing in common. And as soon as we write somebody off and stop talking to them, we lose. But I'll tell you what, there's a movement afoot among the young people. And what they want is they want freedom and they want liberty. They are sick and tired of being told what to do, and they have watched what a colossal failure this government has become. And I am strongly connected to them. I am reaching out to them, and they are working on my campaign. You see many of them are wearing my t-shirts, and they look really good in them.
Tim, we have another question.
Sure.
Thank you. Tim, Jeffrey Wolf I drove down from Torrance at Tom Pollitt's invitation, and I'm glad I did. I heard about some of the work you've done on your committees. I have a question about your ground game for the election. How do you see the ground game coming together so we have a good get out the vote effort?
We've been working on the ground game come November 5th for 1 straight year. I have gone to many, many counties in this state. I intend to get to every one of them. And the ground game is going to be driven by motivated people. And the Republican Party is finally coming out of the dark ages of bankruptcy and basically being broke to where they're now have their house in order. So I think we'll be able to rely on them getting back to a GOTV, but that's only going to be in the counties where they're organized. There are some really well-organized counties. Orange is one of them. San Diego is one of them. In the Central Valley, they've got some great, very effective central committees. And we have other central committees that are dysfunctional, and all they do is fight. My goal is to unify people and put them to work on this campaign. And I don't care where they come from or who they are, but if they care about this state, we are going to put them to work in a way you have never seen in the state of California with the gubernatorial campaign. We are building this from the ground up.
Another question here?
All the dumb criminals, they have no idea the horror they're going to face when you become governor of California. And the smart criminals will be trying to get up their coins and everything to get Greyhound out of California. I have no idea, I have no question on you're going to be tough on crime and make the justice system work here in California. I have this statement and a question. We do have roughly 160,000 prisoners in the prison. The vast majority of them belong there. There are a few hundred or so that don't. They are either completely innocent There are women that were convicted of murder 15, 20 years ago when their cases actually show self-defense, defense of a child, battered woman syndrome. In one case, it was a man who got 15 years to life because he shot a crazed individual who tried to run over his wife with a pickup truck. And they punished him by 15 years of life, reduced to 10 years by the judge on appeal. We have, maybe 3 dozen or so people that I know about, some personally in prison with some of the organizations I'm working with, that are either innocent or being much too harshly punished. Now, Governor Brown won't meet with any of the families or even with county public defenders because basically he's a hack, just like Gray Davis. And they all seem to forget that Pete Wilson, who was governor of California, one of the best governors California ever had, went to Chowchilla in the mid-1990s, called a full camera crew of news reporters in front of a brand new prison opening up, and freed about a dozen women. And
Sure.
Got up there and said,
Did you have a
but
question?
question,
Sure.
question, yeah.
Sure.
Would you, once you're governor of California, will you meet with some of these people and everything and let them present cases of...
I've always believed that if you're going to claim to represent people, you should meet with them. Number one. Number two, justice is not about just arresting the bad guy and locking him up for life. Justice is making absolutely certain that the innocent are protected. And I actually co-authored a bill with a very liberal Democrat. I presented it on the floor. Mark Leno, no doubt, that said that if people are found to be completely innocent, we should make it easy for them to get recompense from the state, because that's the least we can do. And I think the concept of justice has been ignored for far too long in this state, and we need to get back to that.
Hi. I actually just want people to know about the bill that you got passed that nullified the NDAA, which allowed Obama to have the military come and arrest American citizens on American soil and be held indefinitely without charges. How you got Moonbeam to sign it, I got no idea, but anybody who can get that through with that sicko you mentioned, Leno, you got to be a fantastic guy. That's really all I want to say.
I'm not going to argue with you. There was a lady in the back, I think, that was the first up. Okay.
Dick Bannister from Dana Point. We're very, very low on water, particularly in the South County. What are you going to do relative to Orange County and our water supply, different from what's being done now?
You know, one of the things that is a real travesty in a state like California is we're going to spend $100 billion on a train to nowhere with money we don't have, a train we don't need, and we're going to steal people's land in the process of doing it, instead of addressing critical infrastructure needs. So I think we put first things first. We need more water storage, which means up north we got to build more dams so we can control water. And these enviro tyrants that talk about the salmon and all this other stuff, the salmon are doing fine, but the people aren't. And God made us in His image. So having a biblical worldview does matter. I believe we need to do a whole lot more. There's new technologies. I've heard about this fusion technology where they're able to produce desalination. We need to do a lot of that. We need to invest in that as a state so that we take care of the water needs here in the South without taking too much away from those in the North. And that's a tough issue. They said water's for fighting, whiskey's for drinking. But I've been listening very carefully. I'm not walking into this with anything but some principles and some ideas. Water storage is what I'm hearing all over the state. There's broad agreement on that. Well, let's do it. Let's do a peripheral canal to get that water moving instead of building $23 billion worth of tunnels underneath that nobody likes. You know, then we can get the water out to the farmers. But we got to take care of people in Southern California because this is where the population is. That is one of the #1 concerns and will be of my administration. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about the tearing up of the Delta and the huge tunnels that they're going to build that doesn't give us 1 more ounce of water.
That's right. That's ridiculous.
That's right. The second question was, if you are governor, what are you going to do about the Obamacare exchanges?
I will use the bully pulpit, and I will use every bit of the power of the governor's office to nullify and stand against Obamacare. If we have to line up on the border and tell them you're not coming here and you are not taking away our health care. And I think that's what we need to do as a state and as a country, is we need to stand against this. You know, I don't like calling it Obamacare anymore because people stop listening when they hear that. I call it the Affordable Care Act, and how affordable is it if it costs you your job? I just heard from somebody who told me that they were the 50th employee. They didn't know it until they got fired. Now the company only has 49. I've talked to people who have had their hours cut, who are now trying to decide whether they can pay the mortgage or pay for food. California is first in a whole lot of things. But unfortunately, in addition to being first in having the highest income tax, the highest unemployment tax, the most money as a percentage of our budget spent on welfare, 2.5 times more than the rest of the country, we still have the highest poverty rate in the United States. At 23.5% of the people, almost a quarter, are living in poverty. To me, that is an abomination. That is a crime. And that is something we can do about, but we need to get a Brown out in California.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions? Tim, thank you for taking my question. My name is Miraj Chagra from Santa Monica. I'm the only Republican in that city.
I feel your pain.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, my colleague is a Republican. We're the only two. The question that you mentioned a few minutes ago about the Republican Party now not being in a state of bankruptcy, one of the key donors, I believe, that helped the Republican Party out of their fiscal straits was the very union that you referenced a few minutes ago, which was the Service Employees Union. I believe that they're a major donor now to the party. I'm just wondering, do you feel that that's an appropriate donation that the party should have taken? And do you feel that their money may represent a possible impediment to your nominee and ultimately your victory in the state?
Well, my only experience with the SEIU is when they spent $500,000 to take me out of office in 2012. They founded a PAC, and they felt that one assembly member in the entire state was a threat to them for some reason. I had never mentioned them. All I'd ever done is say, you can put a gun to my head and I won't raise your taxes, especially if we're going to give more free stuff to illegals. But this business of getting in bed with the unions, I think, is a very dicey business. And I don't like it. I think the damage that they have done, and the whole idea of having people be able to unionize against the taxpayers is a serious problem. And you know what? Jerry Brown is the one who brought that into being back in the late 70s. So I think that what we ought to do is give them their money back and ask for individual SEIU members that support what we believe in to write us checks. Because I believe the power is in the people, but the minute that you go and sell your soul to any special interest, and I got elected with virtually no money. I got elected walking door to door. As a matter of fact, my campaign headquarters was In-N-Out Burger, and I was able to walk door to door, have a cheeseburger, a double-double, and a milkshake, and I got back to my high school weight. My wife said she's really looking forward to the walking part of this campaign. Any other questions?
Tim, I got another one over here.
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Donnelly. How could you help, if you're governor, help college students have us afford college in general and stop the rising cost of tuition?
That's a great question, because when I went to school, It was $1,500 if you were in state to go to UCI for the year. $500 a quarter. That's a deal. But since that time, which was many moons ago, we have watched the administrative costs in colleges go up at an exponential rate, in large part due to two factors. One, government subsidies, and two, unionized workforce. And also, there's no accountability. They don't run it like a business. They don't answer to anybody. The answer is always more taxes, and they come to the people who work for a living, and then they come to the students. And they say to you guys, oh, you got to pay more. And you can't sustain a 9 or 12% increase year after year after year after year when your wages aren't going up at that rate. It's unsustainable. And these people are obsessed with unsustainability. So I think what we have to do is get a handle on the unions at the schools. And everybody on campus is unionized. And I think we ought to tell the professors and the chancellor, who makes $484,000 a year and gets per diem, a car allowance, and a cheeseburger fund, that one of those has to go. And maybe we put his contract for bid out to all the executives that have been thrown out of work in this last recession, and maybe we get a business guy in there who will run it like a business and put it on a paying basis.
Tim, this is some great answers. It's great to see your commitment here. You're going to be standing up to the unions. And if you get through a term, will you be able to go another term without caving into behavior that seems like it changes when politicians go longer than a single session?
Well, I'm in my second term right now, and I'm just getting my second wind. I'll tell you that right now, and I'm not going to cave on anything. And the only way that a person who gets elected can stand strong is if you stand with them. And it's not just when we come to ask you to support us or ask you to work. Your job starts the day after the election to hold me accountable to everything that I've said I would do and the principles that I said I would stand for. And you know, I want to say something about principles. There's a lot of people in this state that believe we should cave in on all kinds of different issues. I'm not here to try to force my beliefs on anybody. It's a free market. But one thing that I think we should note is if we have somebody who is willing to stand up and identifies core beliefs and will stand by them, that should be our litmus test. Not what the beliefs are, but whether they're willing to stand for them in the heat of battle. And I believe I have been tested, and I have stayed true. And that is what I will do when I am elected governor of this state in 2014. God bless you all, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Tim.